All right, we should be live.
Okay.
Wait for it to update.
I know I'm live. That's that's a good thing.
That's the important part, man.
Part I can control.
All right, well, yeah, we're starting a couple minutes late because some technical difficulties. We're not kids over here trying to figure this stuff out. All right, so yeah, this is Mark, Northwest Bourbon, talking to Keith Barnes from Bainbridge Distilleries. How you doing today, Keith?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm pumped. I just got home from work and heard and got this all set up. I was just eager to talk to you all day, man.
Well, good.
I got a warm up pour going of the Whiskey 40 Saloon that I got from you. So cheers, appreciate it.
Cheers to you. I think I'm doing the Powerball 141 proof. So
no way.
Yeah. I'm coming down with a little bit of cold. I'm trying to fight back.
I hear that's the cure for the common cold.
It's a cure for something.
Is Hazmat.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So, hey, tell me about yourself. Like, how did you get into distilling, and like, what brought you to where you're at now?
Wow. Well, short story. I've been a whiskey drinker for a long time. I started collecting whiskey right around 2002. And I was a Scotch drinker before that, and I had been a bourbon drinker when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I was doing a project with a company that was working in organic foods, and the guy that owned the company was a genius, and he had all these different ideas. And I'd always wanted to make something. I've always been in marketing and branding and corporate communications.
Okay.
But I really wanted to make something other than just like marketing other people's junk. And at the time, all we were working on in my marketing company was just beverage alcohol. That's still the way that it is. So if you're drinking it, probably everything on that back shelf behind you is something that we work on in one form or another, even now.
Oh yeah. Wow.
But I got the bug to see if I could make whiskey, and I got the bug to see if I could make whiskey organically. And people ask me, what are you messing around with organic for? And it's like, okay, well, look at all this whiskey that's around us, right? Okay, do I have a need to? Okay, hold on. Shut up. Is there like, what are the chances that out of the gate I'm going to be able to make a whiskey that's better than a third of the stuff that's on the shelf right now? There's like phenomenal whiskeys out there from all over the world. It's not like you're going to go, oh, hey, yeah, I'm going to kick ass on these guys. But nobody was really making anything organically. And I was really intrigued from my collecting of old bottles, the old technology involved in making whiskey. And it dawned on me that if you were making whiskey organically, you pretty much had to be using all of that old tech stuff. You couldn't use any GMO. You couldn't use anything, anything that's been altered or treated. The way that we make stuff here, it's like everything has to come from the EU, just because, we don't make it the way that the organic people want you to make it. And so I made some whiskey. And it wasn't half bad. Now I look at it and I go, oh, geez, but made some whiskey, and it's a story. Your friends are like, oh, this is the best thing. You need to start a distillery, and I thought, well, I've done almost everything else in spirits, and I have, except for make it, and except for have a company that made it, and so. I wrote up a business plan for myself. I'm self-funded, so I started doing it, and it just took off from there. It started very small, and I can remember with both companies, because I still am a full partner in the other company called Motive, which is the marketing company that I own. I mean, I can remember being here in the morning at 5:30 in the morning and being on a conference call with the brand team from Absolute Vodka, half of them in Sweden, half of them in New York. And I put my headset on mute and then ran out to the distilling floor and put enzymes in the cooker because that's when it was time to put enzymes in the cooker.
Right.
Hoping to God that somebody wasn't going to ask me. I was given a lot of the presentation, so I was hoping somebody was going to ask me some big question that I had to explain while all the platter and mixers and everything was going on out there, steam plant and everything. But
just juggling,
juggling, and I'm still juggling. But I think we hit upon a process where we found a way to do it organically and turn it into a positive. I don't know if you know it, but there's other distilleries that started out organically. I think Woodinville Whiskey started out that way, and Fremont Mischief started out that way.
And it was just hard for them to maintain it, because that's one of the big questions I was going to ask you, because on your website it says, front and center, the organic distillery. So I was like, how is it like? It's a pain
in the ass is what it is. So your grain is 2 or 3 times as expensive as conventional grain. Okay. I think it's better grain, but it's more expensive. And because of the enzymes and yeasts and different processing aids that you use, it's not quite as efficient as doing a new tech. So you're a lot more expensive on one side, and you're not quite as efficient on the other side. And so it's really something that you have to do, or you have to want to do it. And then you have to have the discipline to keep all the records, because between USDA and Washington State Department of Agriculture, who's our organic certifier, I mean, you have to keep records on everything, like every little thing. They come in and they do an audit every year, and they'll pick gin. Okay, so we make gin. It's the product that we make that has the most ingredients in it. So they want.
Really? I didn't know that.
Well, because it has 10 botanicals, and it has all, and so you have to do a backwards trace of everything that went into that product. When the grain came in, when it was processed, when did it go into inventory? When did the juniper come in? When did the coriander come in, or the licorice root come in?
Right.
And did you have enough? You got to show that you had enough on hand to make a batch of gin. And it's like, look, I mean, most of your people that are in organic production that I know, they're doing it because they want to do it. They're not doing it like it's some kind of a marketing shtick or it's some kind of a scam. You really got to want to do it.
You got to have a passion for it.
Yeah, it's not like you're gonna scam your way around it and go, we're making it organically. Like that's that's a big thing. It's a personal thing. Yeah. And if you want to make stuff that has a little bit more of an old school character, which my collecting has made me appreciate more than if there's anything that has informed me over the last 13 years since we opened this thing, it's been that. But it's you got to want to do it. You don't get into it just to try to pull the wool over somebody's eyes and then have a bunch of inspectors in here asking you hard questions and you're trying to make up answers. You got to be able to show it on paperwork and when did you file it? And we have thank God we have an inventory control system and a processing software that tracks everything that we do, every tiny little thing. So, outside of the human error part where somebody didn't input something into the system, which seems to happen with some regularity every year, it's easier to do than it used to be. It used to be like, oh God, organic audit. Okay. Well,
are those organic audits more of a pain than like the OSHA, safety audits and those inspections?
I would say that they used to be. It used to be that the people came in and they really understood what you were doing and they were on your side, and they appreciated that you were doing something that not everybody's doing. I mean, their job and their livelihood rests on having more and more companies want to be organic, and it's not an easy thing to do. So they appreciate it. the last few years, it's been a lot more of they're looking for something. It's like having any kind of inspector that comes in that's looking for something, and they'll decide whether or not they're going to accept it or they're not.
Almost like they're getting points for finding faults.
Yeah, shit. We had an inspection by Washington State Department of Revenue that was a cakewalk compared to my inspection with the WSDA guys. It's like, man. We sat them out here. They had full access to all of our books and our system and everything. And they sat here and they went through everything. And I mean, typically people are, people are doing their job. I think it helps in this kind of a business at this end of the fringe, the organic end of the fringe, to have people that are kind of boosters for what it is that you're doing different, whether that's organic or whether it's, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
I suppose that if you're in Scotland and you're a member of the Scotch Whiskey Association and they've got all their rules and everything, and you got to play by the rules, but you want to do something a little bit different. I mean, it doesn't do you any good to, go in there and go, well, we want to make a single malt whiskey with quinoa or with this or with that. And everybody, oh my God, it's not malted quinoa. No, just like, it's like, okay.
Yeah. Can you see the live chat? Can you see the chat on the side? Adam, Mr. Whiskey Shits was here saying hi. Mr. Sneak said that scams are usually easier with fewer steps. It's very true. If you're trying to do a scam, a get rich quick kind of a thing, then the less steps, the better. Very, very accurate.
I'd have quit distilling during the pandemic and been preying on all these old people, my neighbors, because I'm an old person now. So I'd have been trying to make money at that. That's no. This is like, if you're gonna any kind of distilling, if you're a small distiller and you're trying to make money, and that was the reason you did it. Okay, first off, like, you didn't have a piece of paper and pencil in front of you. Second off, it's like, okay, it used to be like, you want to be a millionaire, open a chain of dry cleaning stores or get in real estate. I don't think it's dry cleaning stores anymore because of the environmental hazards of it, but there's a lot of other things. Trade Bitcoin,
Be a stockbroker or be a lawyer. If you're just out to get money.
I'm a day trader, I'm gonna sit here and I like watch the thing,
It's so fun.
Fucking shoot me now. It's like, okay, I gotta have stuff like moving around in front of me a little bit more. It's there's more interesting things out there. And this category, this beverage alcohol category, I've been in the beverage alcohol business for 35 years, 36 years now, and it is a blast. The people that you work with and the people that you meet and the people that come in, it's work. And it's hard work, but it's fun work. And on the other side of the fence with Motive Marketing Group, working with William Grant & Sons or Jägermeister or, Pernod Ricard with Glenlivet or Chivas or whatever it is, the people you work with, man, I mean, they love this category. They love the business. They love what they're doing. They believe in the story. They want to tell the story. I mean, look, you're like, especially in Scotch whiskey, a little bit different in American whiskey, where there's been so much changeover through the years of companies that have come and gone, National Distilling and Shenley and Seagram's and all these other companies that nobody even recognizes anymore. It's like, hey, they owned all these brands that now are at Buffalo Trace or Sazerac or they're from Heaven Hill or whatever. That's who all these guys were.
Yeah, they were the Stolies and the Sazeracs.
Yeah. I mean, old granddad, he was actually a guy, okay? He's not just like a statue on the front of the thing.
Yeah, that's Basil Hayden.
Yeah, Basil
real
Hayden.
dude.
Yep. So it's like people in this business tend to stay in this business. I've worked with some people in this business. They've been from, they'll be at one company and then they'll go to another company. It's like I get the phone call in the car. Okay, I just quit. So I'm going to work at this other place. I can't talk about it for 2 weeks, but I'll give you a call. The next phone call is from the person that works, whoever, whatever brand it happens to be, big brand, little brand, it doesn't matter. It's like, okay, I just got assigned this person's job and I have no idea what the hell they were doing. Whatever you were doing for them, you got to keep doing it. And I need to know what was planned for the next 8 months. And we need to like get on top of that.
Oh,
And
so there was not a good changeover.
Yeah. And then the next phone call is the person that left, like, hey, all that stuff you were doing for me over at the other place, you need to do that for me because I'm going to be over here. It's like, it just like blows up from one thing to the next to the next. But everybody is kind of in it for the same reasons. There have been a few people, but it's a handful of people that have really been like not decent and not fun to work with. But man, it's like an infinitesimal minority. I've probably worked with in the spirits industry. I've probably worked with 3 people that I absolutely couldn't stand. One of them I probably would have run over with a car if I had the chance.
So not just that you wouldn't have a drink with them.
Oh no.
But you don't want to be in the room with them.
No, I want to be participating in the end of them. Because there's some people that just like this world does not have a place for you. I mean, there's enough terrible shit that goes on without having you like polluting the one industry where everybody's like happy and it's a good time. You're making
the whiskey community. The whiskey community is awesome. Every distillery I go visit, all the people that I chat with online and stuff like that, they're really friendly. Like you have a mutual bond that automatically just makes you friends, and it's great. It's a lot like the only thing I can compare it to is being in the Army. I just hit 15 years in the Army, and
congratulations.
Thank you. Same thing with the soldiers I've worked with, to where it's a very small handful of people that I don't want to be on the same base that they're on, let alone be in the same room.
Yeah.
They're just toxic and gross.
It's like, hey, there may be a friendly fire incident coming your way. It's like, okay, I'm just saying. I don't want you to take it like it's a total surprise. And it's not going to be a kill shot either. It's going to be one of those ones that's a little drawn out.
Yeah, they're going to see your Achilles heel.
Yeah. So.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, I was wondering how big of a crew do you got there at Bainbridge?
It's ludicrously small. I've got 5 people here. I've got a sales guy that's down in the San Francisco market, and then I've got my accounting team that's remotely located, and that's pretty much it. So, it's a small company, and we're like at max capacity until we expand and get some more equipment in here.
Oh wow,
yeah,
that's great. I opened up the Whiskey 40 Saloon, been sipping on that. Really enjoy it. I opened it last night. As you saw on Instagram, I poured a glass of it last night. It's very rich and I don't want to say heavy, but like almost buttery. It's got a nice viscosity to it, but like a rich, buttery flavor to it. I really like it. I honestly do. I think it's really good.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Up until we bottled this, I've been tasting this Whiskey 40 Saloon stuff for 6 years. And I'm like drinking it and I'm tasting it. I'm like, nah, it's not ready. And everybody's like, yeah, when are you going to bottle your bourbon? They said you were going to bottle it in October. I'm like, quit asking me then. I don't know. When it's ready, I don't need to bottle it at any time. I need to bottle it when it's ready.
I hear that's what Makers does. That's why they don't put age statements on their stuff, is because they age it to the taste, not to a certain date.
Yeah. When we were, not to get off the subject, when we first started Yama and we were aging in 10-gallon Mizunara oak barrels, we had no idea how long does whiskey have to be in a Mizunara barrel before it's good. And in a 10-gallon barrel, it's about a 10-gallon barrel charred to American standards. They do it a little bit differently over there, but getting it done to American standards, it's about 26 months, which doesn't seem like a long time. But the difference between 26 months and 28 months is it's a lot. I mean,
Really?
that whiskey ages and it goes along and along and along, and then it's like totally vertical, and it just starts picking up massive amounts of oak. So,
wow. So I was gonna ask about what pronunciation, Mizunara.
Yeah,
Right?
Mizunara. Yeah.
How did you go about getting those? Because it sounds like that's not something I can pick up the phone and call and be like, "Hey, can you send me some stuff? I'll send you some money, PayPal."
Yeah, if you want to get a bunch of people to hang up the phone on you, that's exactly what you do.
Yeah.
You call up and go, "Hey, man, I'm looking for some of that Mizunara stuff. Can you cut me loose with some?" And then there's just like not even a dial tone. They've like completely expunged you from their caller ID list.
You just got blocked. Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked with a friend of mine who has a business that imports stuff from Asia, and we do a lot of work with him when we're doing gift packs for the spirits guys in my other business. They need a flask, or they need glasses, or they need whatever they need. They need something, and for whatever reason, back in the 80s and 90s, we used to make all that stuff here, but we just like shipped it all offshore somewhere, and now we don't make it here anymore. So, like, if you're looking to do metal work, like let's say you wanted to make a lunchbox, like a kid's lunchbox,
right.
Yeah, good luck finding anybody to make a kid's lunchbox here in the U.S. You might find somebody to make a kid's lunchbox that's going to be at Macy's during the holiday. That's like $1,000 a piece because it's limited edition. But man, nobody's doing any of that. They don't do any of it here anymore. It's environmentally unsound, and we like encouraged everybody to take that business offshore. So if you're looking for something, that's pretty much where you got to go. So he told me, my buddy tells me, he goes, "So you're looking for some of this Mizunara wood?" And I go, "Yeah, well, we're looking for this." He goes, "Well, I can get anything from Asia I can get." And I'm like, "Well, shit, we're like a pig in shit then. I don't even have to worry about it anymore. I'm gonna continue to make some calls and look up stuff in the meantime while you're working on your angle." And we worked on this thing for like 3 years. And at the end of it, we were like, it was a dead end. Like we were like, I can't do it. There's no way to break through the ceiling. And it turns out his mother-in-law, his wife is from Japan, and her family's all from Japan. His wife's dad is like super well connected and super rich. His wife's mom is like old money, like knows everybody.
Oh, like her parents used to own the town, kind of like when you meet one of those people where they know everybody.
Yeah, there's these people that are like in some kind of an undercurrent that like we don't even have any idea what it's about.
Yeah.
So he gets on. He lives down in Southern California. He comes up here and he's got his hat in his hand and he's sitting in this office and he goes, "I can't do it." He goes, "I know I told you I could get anything from Asia, but," he goes, "I talked to these people. I even speak Japanese. I talk to these people." He goes, "I say the word Mizunara." He goes, "It's like this curtain just like comes down like over their eyes, and then they're like they're not there anymore." And I'm like, so I said, "Okay, well, hey, we just won't do it." We were trying to do it as it was a fundraiser. We were making this whiskey that had a Japanese theme to it because back in the 1880s on this island that I live on, there was a Japantown that started up from people that left Japan when they started to westernize their society.
Right.
A lot. They moved all up and down the West Coast. We had a village here called Yama, and there was some work.
Okay. So I was going to ask where that name came from.
Yeah, there was a village here at the south end of the island called Yama, and it was populated by these first generation Japanese immigrants that moved here and were working at the lumber mill that was right close by, and then they brought their families over. And the village was here for about 50 years until it burned down. And it was at a terrible spot on the island where nobody else ever wanted to build. The only reason that anything was left there was because it was a terrible piece of property, which is probably the only reason that they were able to get it. And they were talking about developing it, and all the history guys. And there's still a large contingent of Japanese people that live here on this island that had parents and grandparents that were born and grew up there. And so it means something here. So everybody banded together. They were looking to do an archaeological dig down there and to kind of understand what it was like, because most of it was fallen down and burned down and everything else. Yeah. They had some universities and historical agencies from Japan that came over and were involved in this. There was,
and just mainly for the people in the chat, and for clarity, you're talking about they're on Bainbridge Island.
On Bainbridge Island, yeah.
Okay.
And so we heard that this was in the offing for like 9 years. And so we decided we were going to make this whiskey as a fundraiser, and then we're going to give all the money to the effort to survey and understand what went on in this thing.
Yeah.
Then it's a big giant secret because, we figured, hey, why don't we use some Japanese whiskey yeast? Well, yeah, go talk to those guys. Yeah, they get their whiskey yeast from Scotland. So that's it, We tried to import barley from Japan. Guess what? And the only thing harder to get from Japan, the only thing harder than barley to get is Mizunara oak. And then I said, hey, why don't we just get those Japanese barrels? I mean, we always hear about this cult Mizunara thing. How hard could that be? So anyway, my buddy comes here. He tells me the bad news. I can't do it. I'm a loser. He goes home. His wife goes, "What's wrong? You seem like you're really upset." He goes, "Well, I had to go up and tell Keith that we couldn't do the Mizunara thing." She goes, "The Mizunara oak thing for the barrels?" And he goes, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, you told him that you could get anything out of Asia." And he's like, "Yeah, fine. Oh, yeah. Like fucking
rub it in my face.
Yeah, kill me with it." He goes, "I'm going to talk to my mom. I bet she knows somebody." And he's like, "Your mom? You're going to talk to your mom?" She's like in her 80s. She goes, "Yeah, I'm going to call her in the morning." So she calls the mom in the morning, and then I get a call from my guy, from Will, the next day. He goes, "Mom knows a guy that used to run a barrel factory, but didn't have any heirs, and he closed it down. But he has Mizunara wood in the wood yard, and once a month they do their own little auction." And they have people come in and they have all this air dried prime barrel wood, and people go in there and they bid on it. Suntory bids on it, and Nika bids on it, and Mars probably bids on it now, and all this other stuff. And she talked to him, and he agreed that when he finds the next load of Mizunara out there, they'll call you, or we'll call you, and then they'll give us a price, and then you have to buy it. And I said, "Okay, I can do that." He goes, "No," he goes, "I'm not kidding you. If I call you and say, you have to buy it, it's this amount of money, you got to tell me right now, and then you have to, whatever you're doing, you have to wire the money." I'm like, okay. And I go, "How long is it going to take?" He goes, "Shit, it could take months." So like 2 weeks later, it's like 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I'm the only one up. My phone rings, and I pick up the phone. He goes, "They found some Mizunara wood." And I'm like, "How much is it?" He goes, "I'm sending it to you." So he sends me this email of like a manifest of all of this Mizunara wood that's been rail split into certain sizes. And it's all in like centimeters and Japanese characters. And I'm like, "How the hell am I supposed to read this?" He goes, "You've worked with centimeters before." And I go, "I got a good idea." He goes, "Well, are you going to buy it?" I go, "How much do they want for it?" It was like $11,900. And I go, "I don't even know how much it is." He goes, "It's like the size of a large coffee table, but it's like 9 feet long. Do you want it?" I'm like, "Okay." We bought it. So we had to go through all this crap to get it over here because it was raw lumber, and they're
Oh man, yeah, I didn't even think about that.
It was terrible. And we finally got it over here. And I called Jay Gibbs, who owns Gibbs Brothers Cooperage out in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And I go, "Hey, man, I got a project for you." He knew we were doing it, but he probably never thought it would happen. He goes, You got the Japanese oak?" I go, "Yeah." I said, "Can you make those out of it?" He goes, well, we can make barrels out of anything. And I'm like, okay, I think I've heard a line like this before. I can get anything from Asia.
Yep.
So we rail the wood back to him. He starts working on it. He calls me like 2 weeks into it. He goes, this shit is terrible to work with. I go, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, you look at it. He goes, it looks fine. But he goes, my guys are out here making these barrels, and even no matter how much you heat it up, it doesn't want to bend. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, so you'll get the barrel made, and then they'll like finally like wiping the sweat off their brow. Like, we got one made, and they'll walk away from it. And he goes, it sounds like a lightning crack. And they'll turn around and there'll be like a stave that's just like blown out on the side. And I go, why? He goes, there's no way of knowing. It just decided to like explode out. So out of all this stuff, our first batch of Mizunara barrels, 10-gallon barrels, I mean, which is like almost the size of this glass. It's like pathetically small. Right. We got like 14 Mizunara barrels and like 4 huge boxes full of Mizunara scraps of all the like broken staves and stuff. The guys thought the wood was valuable, so they sent it back to us. And so we started the whole Mizunara thing.
Yeah.
But it was a secret. It had to be a secret because Suntory had already bought Beam, and we knew that if somebody had blown their, shot their mouth off, that there's some American guys making Mizunara whiskey out in,
right.
Washington State, somewhere in America. They could have done it in a heartbeat. I mean, one phone call, those barrels are on a plane, they're over here, and you got Jim Beam or you got whatever it is that's going into those barrels, and it's like, well, that's the first.
Yeah.
So we controlled ourselves. We kept our mouth shut, and then
loose lips sink ships. That's what they say.
No shit. Yeah.
So there's only one other company I've heard of that makes the Mizunara cask, and that's the Angel's Envy bottle that was like $3,000 a piece. And so when I saw that you had some finished, I got excited. I really did.
Have you tried that Hokkaido cask?
So I give you the free advertising here. So these sample packs, I don't know why every single distillery isn't doing this. Because what a lot of people say is they're hesitant to go buy a $100 bottle if they don't know what it tastes like. They don't know anything about it. So they're hesitant to go buy a $100 bottle. Yeah. Well, they'll go to the bar and buy a $20 pour of it, though. Right? So they can try it. That way they're not out the other 80 if they don't like it.
Yeah.
So on the website, Bainbridge Distillery, you can see right there on the website these sample packs. And one of them is the Mizunara. And so I'm going to drink some of that because you got me all excited talking about it. I tried a little sip of it the other day. I tried a little bit of each one of them. That way, get some air in them, get them going. And I'm planning on doing a video where I do all 4 of them, like in a flight, and try them all and talk about them, like get more into them.
Well, do your favorite.
The sample pack is awesome. Every distillery that has a higher end tier of bottles should do what you're doing. It's brilliant. I don't know why they're not doing it.
When you're like, if you're small and privately held and not owned by somebody big, God, man, you're making the decision to pull full bottle product off the line and put it in the sample pack. So we typically do sample packs around the holiday.
Okay.
We've ramped up our that's called Hokkaido cask. We've ramped up the Hokkaido cask program significantly so that we have more of it available. But it still won't be like, available. The Mizunara barrels that we have now from Japan, full-size barrels, they're still murderously hard to get.
Full size, so not 10-gallon ones?
No, they're 200 liters or 59 gallons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, legit.
Like normal size whiskey barrels.
Yeah, like European whiskey barrels. So they're a little bit bigger. But man, they are a thing of beauty. I mean, American whiskey barrels, it's like, oh, well, it's beautiful on the inside. So, okay, you can go with that with American whiskey barrels. And, the staves don't it's all tight, nothing's leaking, but, they're at different levels and all that kind of stuff. And who cares? It's a whiskey barrel, a Mizunara whiskey barrel, man. I mean, you run your hand on it and you can't even feel like that. It feels like it's one piece of wood. It feels like it's a piece of furniture before it gets stained. They're perfect. And the wood is like 3 times thicker than an American barrel. They're just
Really?
well, because it leaks. Like it's a terrible wood.
Is it more porous, or because the way you were describing, it's hard to bend. Like if it starts to bend, it wants to break. That's just super hard.
Yeah.
And so it also leaking more.
It has. Well, so the Mizunara oak, they don't harvest it. They harvest it between like 250 and 450 years old. So I mean, the trees are they're not just going out there cutting a tree. They're cutting a tree that's been there for a long time. They don't harvest very many of them every year. And the way that the Mizunara grows, it seems like there's a tremendous amount of weight put on this tree as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you've got grain that's just going through it at all different directions. And you've got some grain that runs kind of transverse from inside to outside. You'll be standing there looking at a barrel, like you looked at it yesterday, and then you just stand there and all of a sudden it starts to drip whiskey out of it for no reason. Like what happened there? Well, who knows? It's the reason, they started experimenting in Japan with Mizunara oak during the war. Okay. Up on Hokkaido, when they weren't getting, before we had planes that could reach out and touch someone.
Right.
So they were fooling around with Mizunara oak there because when you're doing that kind of stuff that they were doing, nobody wants to be nice and send you their used barrels anymore. Yeah. It's like, no, you don't get that. You're going to be punished. We're not sending you any surplus metal, and we're not sending you our used barrels. So they started to use the indigenous oak there to make barrels out of, and then they discovered how terrible Mizunara oak is to make barrels out of because they leak and they break, and there's all this other stuff that goes on with them. The war is over. Everybody's getting back to normal. The economy is trying to come back. And then now they're revisiting 15 years later, these old barrels of whiskey that they made while they were desperate for wood back in the war. And they're like, holy shit, this stuff is amazing. And so you start to see some of it trickle out, and then it starts to get this kind of a cult following. And then after we had the incident, I think it was in 2000, where the Japanese entered a Scotch whiskey contest in the blinds and didn't disclose where the whiskey came from, and they won. Then people started to pay more attention to the whiskey that was coming out of Japan, and people started to taste little bits of Mizunara. And it was only Mizunara that was Mizunara finishing. That's all they were using it for there.
Right.
We talked to the Japanese when we were building this Mizunara program that we're using virgin No. 3 charred Mizunara, and they're like, "You're nuts, man! You can't use that stuff. It's way too hot. It's way too volatile. It's got way too much chemistry to it. You got to season it using rice wine or brandy, or you got to do something to take the hard edges off of it." And we're like, "You don't need to do that. That's for pussies, man. Come on, it's America. If we got to go to America." We got to go to No. 4 char to beat the hard edges off this stuff. We're going to do it, but we're going to give it a try. And when we first got our Mizunara barrels in, and I took a bung out and I smelled the inside of the barrel, I've never smelled anything like that before. It is so far away from American oak. It's not even funny. It's like a totally different thing.
Am I crazy for getting cherry ice cream on this? Because there's lots of vanilla, lots of sweet cherries, but it's not like a dark cherry, it's a lighter cherry.
And you'll get, so the thing with in Yama, the Yama whiskey that's full Mizunara, it evolves over time. So in your glass, you could have a glass. If you can not drink all of it in an hour, you can come back to it every 20 minutes and it's going to be like a different whiskey. It just continues to go and go and go in the glass.
The influence from that difficult wood just keeps changing it. And
freaking difficult wood. So this stuff here, it'll do that to a degree, but it's the wood influence in that is not as prevalent as it is with Yama. And Yama is made with barley, and barley is kind of I love barley whiskey, but barley doesn't have a lot of detail to it. So it's buttery and it has a nice kind of a low end and kind of a booming flavor to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When it's not peated, you can actually taste the barley. It's like the perfect canvas for Mizunara oak, because Mizunara oak has so much to give. Yeah. You take care of that low end and that texture with the barley grain, and then the Mizunara does the rest. This is Hokkaido cask is wheat whiskey, which is a little more fine boned from a flavor profile, a little bit higher in pitch than barley whiskey. So
is it made with your Battle Point?
It is. So we aged Battle Point for like 5.5, 6 years. We first started. Our whole thing was because people were marketing white whiskey. We had some white whiskey. It's like, well, that's not whiskey. That's moonshine. If I'm drinking stuff like that, man, I'm reaching into the middle of the pile of jugs. I'm not taking a jug from the front or the back. I'm taking the middle jug of that moonshine, because that's all that it is moonshine. And if it's moonshine, if you're going to do white whiskey, like, do it legit, man. Like, fucking pump it up at like 130 proof. Like, proof. Come on. You don't need to like make wussified white.
Right.
You need to make wussified.
We're here to kill brain cells. Let's do it right.
Yeah, come on. Like, there's no halfway measure here. Go all or go home. So we were happy. We waited until the whiskey was what I thought was done, and that it was nice and brown. So, and without any coloring, all from the barrels.
Right.
And I still have bottles of that very first run, which isn't what it is today. I mean, we've continued to whittle on it as we've gone along. The first time we won World's Best Wheat Whiskey with Battle Point was in 2014. So that was 4 years after we had started making it and selling it.
Yeah.
And it was good enough that I thought that we could enter it and not be embarrassed, especially in the World Whiskies Awards. It's like in American awards, if you suck, then you're invisible. They just don't talk about you.
Right.
Even Paul, even the Ultimate Spirits Challenge, Paul Pacult, if you suck, he'll let you like go back to your day job and not have to be withered and pathetic. Man, you read like Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible, somebody who's getting like a low 80. Oh God, it's like suicide time. It's like if I read a review like that about my whiskey, I'd be having the blade hovering over my wrist, like, oh, my life is over. This is like, I can't show my face in front of people anymore. And, you read these reviews out of the UK and out of the EU to a lesser degree. It's like, man, like if you have something you're questioning, don't send it. Just don't.
Yeah.
So we thought that we had some winners. Our vodka was good, and we hadn't started making gin yet, and we had Battle Point. And so we sent them over, and we got a call in February from somebody from the UK with an English accent. I know a lot of people from the UK. So this person calls me up and goes, "Yeah, I'm calling from the World Vodka Awards, and we know you had your entry, and we're having our gala announcement of the winners, and we'd like to have some of your products so that we could pour it at the event." And I'm like, okay, This either sounds like you just trying to get some free product for an event, or it sounds more like one of my friends from the UK is putting somebody up and they're like pulling my leg just to like jerk me around, thinking that I like won some kind of a prize. And so I go, yeah, I'll look into it, and then hung up the phone and then never gave it another thought. They probably like called back 4 times. They're like, and the last call, they were like, look, we need to get some of your vodka over here. I go, why do you need my vodka over there? What is so important about having my vodka over here? And the woman goes, well, I can't tell you. I'm not supposed to tell you, but we need it over here because you guys won. And I said, we won what? She goes, you won it. I go, what's it? She goes, you won the award for vodka. I go, what's it called? She goes, the world's best vodka. I mean, I said, like, out of like the hundreds of vodkas that people probably entered. She goes, yeah. She goes, like, from like 26 different countries. You guys won the world's best vodka. I go, I'm embarrassed to even like say that. Like, I don't want to thinking that I'm being a braggart.
Yeah, so, it's like, how do you sleep that night? You'd be so excited.
So we sent them some vodka. And then about 2 months later, they did the judging for whiskey, and Battle Point won the world's best wheat whiskey. And I was more of a believer by that point. I didn't give them any shit. They wanted product, and I was like, okay, I'll send you some product.
Yeah.
But a Battle Point whiskey, you know, whether it's the Two Islands Battle Point, Isla cask, Barbados cask, Hokkaido cask, and the standard. So we've won world's best wheat whiskey 6 times.
Oh, wow.
With a Battle Point product. So Hokkaido cask has won 3 times. That just won world's best wheat whiskey in London back in February. The 3rd time for that one. So
I had one little taste of the Battle Point the other day.
Yeah.
And I could tell a lot of similarity between this one and the Whiskey 40 Saloon. That has a really rich, nice, good full body mouthfeel. Cherries and honey, but they're like burnt cherries. That's good. I really like it.
So this is made with 2 different kinds of yeast, an Irish yeast and a Scottish yeast. So, and it's distilled a little bit higher proof than you typically would with an American whiskey. But when we designed this whiskey, it was we engineered it to work in small barrels, like 10 and 15 gallon barrels.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of things that are happening chemically in whiskey when it's maturing, and there's a lot of them that have to do with, you always hear about the ratio of wood to liquid. You hear about that part of it, which is true. There's some other stuff that happens, and it's just clock. Doesn't matter if it's a big barrel or a little barrel. It's just a certain amount of time things start to happen.
Right.
And we realized it with Battle Point that in a little barrel, you probably were never going to get to the point where you'd hit, in a 10-gallon barrel, you're going to hit like 4 or 5 years in a 10-gallon barrel. I don't think so. That stuff, you're going to be chiseling it out of the barrel with a mallet and a wedge. So, the only way to get rid of the volatiles and the things that are going to be offensive in it, that would normally be in it and would normally go away or convert into something else over the course of time in a barrel, is just to not put it in the barrel in the first place. So distill the whiskey a little bit cleaner than you would distill a bourbon. Make sure that some of those high-end things that are going to take a long time to cure, just make sure they're not in there. But make sure you're still distilling low and slow, so you're getting a lot of the stuff that you know that you can deal with,
Right.
that, you know, that'll be there. And over the course of time, then, you know, and that's still essentially what we do with this. I think even when we moved to 53-gallon barrels, it was like, okay, well, we've been making it this way for a long time, and we're distilling it a little bit cleaner. We thought maybe it won't take as long. Maybe it won't take as long to age. Which is completely not wrong. It still takes like 5.5 to 6 years for this stuff to age before I'll approve it. And maybe because I get more and more picky, and, you know, I'm not bottling that, you know. But Odom needs another order. I know, we'll get.
Well, yeah, that goes with what you were saying earlier. If you have questions about it, don't send it out. You'd rather people not be able to get your stuff this year than for them to get it and write you off.
That Battle Point really is nice. A little cinnamon, and, you know, it's got a little nuttiness to it.
Yeah, the lingering mouthfeel well after you drink it is like there was definitely cinnamon in your mouth.
Yeah. And I have no idea where that comes from. I mean, it's the majority of it is Missouri white oak, number 3 char. I have a feeling that it's something to do with the Scotch whiskey yeast, which is difficult to work with. The Irish whiskey yeast, that stuff's got round heels, man. That stuff just would like fall over for anybody. It doesn't matter. pH, temperature, you know, shit's like swinging all over the place, and that stuff is still going, you know, house of fire. The Scottish whiskey yeast, it's like you say something derogatory towards Scotland, and then, you know, your ferment like stalls out, and you're like, what the, you know, hey, come on. Yeah, I was just, you play Austin Powers with Fat Bastard in the background, and it's like the distillery explodes because the Scottish whiskey yeast is so bitchy. I was
going to say, is that the group that says that you shouldn't even swirl their whiskey because it's fragile or something?
People have all these ideas of what you can and can't do. So I can't tell you how many people told me, well, what are you aging your whiskey in? Well, we're 10 and 15-gallon barrels. And they're like, you know, you can't make good whiskey out of a 10, 15-gallon barrel. And I'm like, okay.
Watch me.
I guess we'll see. We'll see if we can. But the number of people that told me that, it was like, well, how much whiskey have you ever made? Well, I'm a whiskey educator, or I'm a whiskey expert, or I'm a whatever.
So that means zero.
I had some tool bag that came in here one time, and he calls me up, and he goes, I wanted to stop by and try your whiskey. This is a long time ago. And probably like 2012, 2013. And no, probably it was after we won the award. And he goes, well, I'm driving over from Bellevue. I've got some business in Port Townsend, and I wondered if I could stop by around 9 o'clock. And I said, well, we're not really open at 9 o'clock, but you can stop. I'll be here. I'm like, at that point, I was the only one here. I mean, I was the one employee. So, so this guy pulls up, and he gets out of his car, and he comes. I let him in, and I pour him up a little bit, and he goes, and he has the glass, and he like raises it up, and then he stops and he puts it down, and he goes, I'll have you know that I'm somewhat of an aficionado. And I said, really? I said, I don't think I've ever heard anybody self-describe themselves as an aficionado. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, I've got a whiskey collection. I've got like 2,000 bottles of whiskey in my whiskey collection. And a lot of it is from like the beginning of the 20th century. I drink all different kinds of whiskey, and I don't even call myself an aficionado. I've got a good palate. I'm blessed that I have a good palate, but I don't refer to myself as an aficionado. No. He didn't refer to himself in the third person, which I'll give him a little bit of, but I think he wanted to. It was like,
sounds like a winner.
He goes, so he takes a sip of it, and he's like swishing it around, and he's making a big ordeal out of it. And I'm like watching him, and so he sets the glass down, and he goes, I said, well, what do you think? He goes, well, it's not terrible. I go, well, that's good. I said, every whiskey maker longs to hear those words coming out of, coming out of the mouth of somebody that they let into their shop 2 hours before opening time. I go, so what is it that you're drinking that you're excited about? He goes, I actually have some in the car. I'll bring it in. And I said, what is it? He goes, it's called Dalmore 12. And I'm like, okay, Dalmore 12. I like Dalmore. I mean, it's
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I thought he was going to say, it's like, I'm drinking Macallan 30 or, Glenmorangie, whatever. I'm drinking like highfalutin thing. And he's drinking Dalmore 12. And I'm thinking, okay, now I know who I'm dealing with. So it's like, okay, well, thanks for stopping by. I think it's a good thing. You got to like ratchet my ego down a little bit. And I don't have a lot of ego in it. I mean, these whiskeys, you make these whiskeys and you throw them out there, and you got to be your own worst critic. You got to taste the stuff that you're putting out there. And if it sucks, man, you cannot put it out there. This Whiskey 40 Saloon, this stuff went for like 5 years, and I could not even countenance putting it in a bottle. People are like, oh, you ready to bottle that yet? I'm like, no, it's not ready. It's still like dissing me. It's not really giving me what I wanted to get out of it. And it was there when we bottled this. I think the next batch we had a little bit more. It was the first time that we had really done a mixed grain mashing.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably a little bit more stable, but we'll see. It won a gold in San Francisco and in New York, so I'm like, okay, I'll take it. It did not win a gold. It did not win a gold in London, but it did not suck enough in London to warrant some kind of a write-up that would make me feel terrible about myself.
Well, that's good. At least there's that.
Yeah, at least there's that. I get to save a little bit of face with that. But the battle point has been it's been a great whiskey. It's continued to evolve. The better we get at processing, the more stable it is, the more, and the more different it is every batch. 2 years ago, we did a 4-pack of Battle Point that were all single barrels, and they were idiotically different. They all came from the same batch, and they were all in different barrels, and they were all so different. I mean, one of them tasted like tangerine sherbet. One of them tasted like baking spice. One of them was like smoky and citrusy. It was all like they were like the barrels make such a huge difference. Everybody talks about, distillers are all superstitious about wanting to do it the same time every time. Every time you do it, you want to do it at the same time.
Yeah, but if more than half your flavoring is coming from the barrel itself, then
it's nature, man. It's random. I mean, if you can make one side of it consistent, then at least you got that going for you. You can't make the wood side of it consistent. There's just no way to do it. I'm sure that Buffalo Trace has done barrel series, and they understand all kinds of stuff about wood, and Dr. Bill over at Glenmorangie, he's like an expert on oak and all the rest of that. I mean, these guys know all kinds of things, and there's people that have done all kinds of studies and high-speed gas chromatography and all the rest of that stuff. Well, I mean, we do that stuff here too, but it's like, at the end of the day, are you gonna tell me, the reason that we don't have a genetically modified yeast for whiskey yet is because nobody can figure out what parts of a yeast cell make what kind of flavor. They can figure out how to make like artificial yeast that will ferment something and make alcohol. But the other side of it is like, it's like why people are so gout up when they're the winemakers. They sweat over all these different yeasts because they're looking for, and what are they looking at? They're not looking at some kind of a gas burn readout on what it produced. They're looking at 60 years worth of notes of winemakers that say Well, this one we know is going to give you notes of dark cherry, and it's going to concentrate graphite,
Right.
and it's going to do this, and it's going to do this.
But not the why.
Yeah, but not the why. Well, nobody knows the why.
Right.
It's like you could go mad trying to figure that out. For me, it's all about experimentation. When we started out with 20 different kinds of yeast. And we still in-house here, we're using 7 different kinds of yeast. We hardly use the same yeast for anything. I mean, you can't use one yeast and make whiskey out of it, and then make vodka out of it, and make gin base out of it, and it's like it all ends up. Yeast it's not magic. It's it's like shit. You gotta.
That's interesting. I've never heard that before.
I mean, so you make a 500 gallon batch. We're on a 500 gallon batch system here. Okay. So we make a 500 gallon batch of whatever kind of whiskey that we're making, whether it's wheat whiskey or whether it's bourbon or whatever. You pitch your yeast in it. At the end of it, you probably get 8 or 9% beer, which is you're up to 8 or 9%, alcohol level. And so then you put it in the still and you distill it. Okay. So 500 gallons becomes 40 gallons pretty quick. And so what you have on your first run, you've got alcohol, you got ethanol, you got some water that you couldn't get out of there because it was a little bit persistent. And then you have all of the byproduct that the yeast pitched off while it was metabolizing the grain sugar that you had converted from starch using your enzymes or using your barley malt. So you're using a biological process to break starch chains apart into smaller particles, which are sugars. And then your yeast is going to eat that. And different yeasts can only metabolize a certain spectrum of sugars.
Huh.
And while they're eating the sugar, they're pissing out alcohol and they're pooping out all this other stuff. It's not like it's just magic. Oh, the yeast consumed the yeast consumed the sugar and made alcohol. Yeah, okay. Well, like when yeast isn't happy, when the pH is off or the temperature's off, yeast is like bitchy and it's making alcohol, but man, it's making all kinds of other stuff that you do not want to have in there.
Right.
Off flavors and all kinds of stuff. That's why people manage their fermentation. So every different yeast makes a different set of flavoring molecules that it throws off. And then you run it through the still, and as the ethanol starts to take to vapor, it starts to pull all this other stuff out with it. And you'd think that everything would come out in a row, like, methanol that turns to vapor at a lower point than ethanol does, and all the other stuff. It doesn't come out. The first thing to come out is a big plug of ethanol that's jammed up with methanol and all this other crap. That's the heads. That's why the heads are so volatile.
Right.
The still, nothing starts to come out until the ethanol starts to flow. The ethanol is molecularly has an abundance of electrons, which are sticky. And so all of these little molecules of flavor that the yeast threw off stick to the ethanol molecules. It's not a bond like you could count on. If it's a bond, you could count on it to make its way all the way through the still and come out the other side. It's just attracted to it. And so all these flavors that the yeast made stick to the ethanol molecules. And if you distill low and slow, then they continue all the way through and they come out in the other end. And you can segregate them in your heads and tails and your heart's cut, and you can redistill them and maintain them. But every yeast makes a different set of flavor. And if you're making beer or wine, you started out with, 25 or 500 gallons of malt stuff here, of some malt wash or what they call it, wort. And then you're going to make beer out of it. Well, you got 500 gallons, it's going to be 500 gallons of beer. You got 500 gallons of grape juice, it's going to be 500 gallons of wine. The impact of the yeast is mitigated by the mass of all the other stuff that's in there. You got 500 gallons of whiskey mash, you got 40 gallons of first cut, and you got 35 gallons of end cut. And so all you have is a trace amount of water, a shitload of ethanol and all these little molecules that were persistent enough to stick to the ethanol that come out. That's why yeast matters, because every yeast performs differently on every distilling substrate, whether it's wheat or barley or sugar or grape juice or what have you. And so yeast isn't a thing, it's like the thing.
Right.
So, I mean, we did taste trials here, even though Bainbridge is a small company. I work with all these big companies, and we did our trials just like they do there. We probably had 20 different tasters came in, and we've had people that were divided up into different groups, and each of them had 6 different bottles that were the same grain that were fermented and distilled with different types of yeast. And that's how we kind of nailed down what battle point was going to be. We had all these different variations and then blendings of, one yeast product with another yeast product. That's how we ended up with the 2 yeast scheme for battle point, was because these 2 yeasts made an off-put that just really played well together, and it like magnified the detail that you could get out of wheat grain. If it was barley, it would be totally different, and if it was corn, it would have been totally different.
Man, I've been side by siding while listening. I've got the Battle Point here, and I've got the Whiskey 40 here, and they have a lot of things in common, but what they have separate from each other is a lot of fun. Because what I was telling you about the Battle Point with the cherry ice cream, lots of vanilla, lots of light cherry, and then the Whiskey 40, it's on the darker end of the spectrum. Going from one to the other, the 40 is a lot darker. There's a little more char influence, a little more like roasted nuts.
So a lot of that is the triticale. So triticale is a
wheat hybrid of wheat and rye.
Yeah. And with rye, we've done rye whiskey here, but the technology in organic distilling to process rye is left wanting. I mean, rye is cantankerous on its own, let alone doing it organically. But triticale, the wheat rye hybrid, has about 80% of the characteristics of a nice, really bright, grassy, brassy rye,
right?
And the handling characteristics and processing characteristics of wheat. So, I mean, that's a great thing that there's an alternative like that. And then you have the corn, and
yeah,
I always used to discount corn. We're gonna do a corn whiskey here at some point, but
towards like 95% corn.
Well, we're like, hey man, it's all in. So we're like, we start off, if we're doing like single grain, it's single grain. If we're gonna do corn whiskey, then it's corn whiskey. We probably would look to see if we can. We have lots of different single grain whiskeys that are here in the house. So we have rye single grain, and triticale single grain, barley single grain, malted barley single grain, different kinds of wheat. So we're not going for oat or emmer and farrow or any of that stuff.
Okay.
But we would look at corn whiskey if we felt like it was deficient at all. We probably would look at it and do some experiments to add some different flavoring whiskeys to it, pretty much like they do in Canada.
Yeah,
they have a whole library of flavors and flavoring whiskeys, and then see what seems to like set it off. What really brings it to life. Right. And that's really what you want to do. It's not really about maintaining single grain. It's about locking the doors. What it is.
Gotcha.
It's not about maintaining single grain. It's about like just like setting it off, like finding a counterpoint in the recipe to like bring it to life, to like magnify.
Right. And so if it didn't give you what you wanted, you'd finish it in something else or something of that sort, to kind of bring out of it what it's missing by itself.
Yeah, and that could
Right.
that could be another whiskey, and it could be another barrel.
Right. And
The barrel, the other barrel route. That's like a two go out, one comes back. There's like
right.
sometimes
Yeah.
there's no return from that. You take hey, we got 5 barrels of Battle Point we're going to bottle up, but we want to do an experiment. So we take 2 of them and we run them off into a different set of barrels. And it's like,
Yeah.
hey, we might never not ever see that. It might turn out to be terrible. The Isla cask whiskey, when we did it, I sampled that stuff once a month for like 8 months. And the first 7 months, I was convinced that I had just thrown 2 barrels of Battle Point whiskey, perfectly good Battle Point whiskey that I could have just bottled up and shipped out and been happy and not stressed out.
I knew exactly where you're going with that, because the sample pack that had the Battle Point, the Hazmat Battle Point,
Yeah,
the Mizunara cask, and the Isla cask.
yeah,
The Isla was the 4th. It was my last pick. If I was to rank them, but like I said, I've only had one drink of each one of them. I only did it once, and I'm planning to do an episode where I just get into that flight. But yeah, I knew exactly where you're going, because all the other ones were like on par with each other, and that Isla was just like.
when I first tasted it, it was like, okay, that stuff is terrible. It was like licking a campfire,
I didn't go that far on it.
like a beach fire that went out and you went back the next day and then you licked the wood that had been extinguished by the salt.
You stirred your drink with that.
It was awful.
Yeah.
But unlike the 7th month, it started to change, and it really, and
you found the breaking point, just like with the other one where you said after that month it really goes.
Yeah, it just, there was a point where the wheat part of it started to beat back the smoke part of it, and the smoke became more tame and more of almost like a wrapper. It's almost like, I don't know if you smoke cigars or not, but you've got a Nicaraguan fill and a Dominican wrapper, and both of them play a role, and both of them have a scale as to where they're supposed to play.
Right.
And that's how it started to fan itself out. And I knew
you got to find that right combo to give you the balance.
We came to a point with that first batch of Isla cask that that there was this kind of almost like a shaft of wheat flavor that like broke through the middle. You got like this wrapper of smoke, and then the sweetness and the citrus and the cherry of the wheat kind of came through and like kind of parted it. And that's when I was happy with it. I was like, okay, we can do this and not feel like we're throwing money away. And that actually, in Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible, that's the highest rated whiskey that we've ever had in there. So
really,
he actually, his review was, I'm not going to be not embarrassing, but it was like, he said part of it was that the smoke part of it was so subtly crafted. It was like catching smoke laden snowflakes on your tongue and then having them melt away and have this like sweetness and potency of the wheat left over. And I'm reading this, and I'm like, I'm getting chills, and I'm like, okay, like I write a lot of copy, but
right.
I wouldn't even have written that. I certainly would never write copy like that for myself, because everybody that I know would go, okay, you're just being a douchebag now. It's like
those descriptions are crazy, because I was talking about burnt cherries in like a cherry ice cream
Yeah.
on this guy earlier.
I would like to me, that was like, it was like, cause we do this, we make like a bread pudding with brandied cherries and then brown sugar on the top of it. And then when we flame it, then the cherries and the brandy and the brown sugar all get together. And for me, that's what that always reminds me of. Is like that kind of a singed brown sugary cherry thing. Yeah.
So going over to the chat, Sean from Whiskey Wars said, "What's up?" Hanging AZ, Cheech, Marvin from Whiskey Wine 101 gave you props on your Instagram game. Brian Slapshot, good to see you. The bunch of people came in to say hi, so I just want to shout out to the chat right now and let them know that we see you and appreciate you being here.
We're not just sitting here being whiskey dumb shits talking about stuff that only we're talking about.
Oh man, it's good though, man. I'm enjoying it.
Well,
so all you guys that just jumped in recently missed it a while ago. Talked about if you go on Bainbridge Distillery, you'll see that they have a sample pack that I think every distillery should be doing, because nobody wants to spend $100 on a whiskey that you know nothing about. So you're like, am I going to regret spending that money? Because I have regretted it before. And so being able to get a nice bottle of, how many ounces are these? 200 milliliters?
Yeah.
How many ounces is that?
Who knows?
I have to take my boots off to do that kind of math, man. I'm just a soldier over here.
It's like 25 ounces in a 750. So probably, who knows? Okay, I'm not mathing it out.
So yeah, instead of spending $100 on one bottle, you spend $100 on being able to try all four. That's way better than spending $20 on a single shot at a bar. And like I was telling you earlier,
we sample all this stuff too. This stuff here too. So you can do like a whiskey tasting flight here for $5.
That's awesome. Yeah,
I mean,
everybody should be doing.
We're on Bainbridge. I figure people are going to schlep their ass over here to try our whiskey. I'm not going to like gouge them on.
Yeah, you're not going to nickel and dime. Well, that's what you were talking about earlier with you're in this business because of the passion, the community, you love whiskey, all that stuff. It's not about making money. It's not like, oh, I'm going to get into the whiskey game to become a millionaire. That's
no. Well, it has to, at some point it has to be about making money. But I think once you've figured out your product scheme and what works as far as the product scheme goes, then you can start to look at, well, a business is a business. If I was 40 or 30, I'd be looking at a business and man, I'd be like getting up at 2:00 in the morning and, I'd be all gung ho. And I'm super gung ho about this because I believe in it. I believe in the category. I believe in what we're doing here. We're doing some things that are different, which I think adds some variety to what's going on in craft distilling now. But it has to be a business too, and you got to figure out ways that you can keep running and that you can make enough profit to make it worthwhile. And I think that's kind of like the second phase of distilling. I mean, the first phase is that you sell your first stuff, and then you figure out that you really need to leave that stuff in a barrel for 5 years.
Yeah.
And so now you've like taken your window and gone from 2 years. Now you're like at 5 years, which including the first 2 years is like 7 years. And then you're starting to ramp up your production. And so you're really 10 years into it. And now you figured out what it is. You figured out a lot about what you can do.
Yeah.
You have costs.
Your formula, your kind of SOP on how to just have a well-oiled machine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably not quite as sanitary as that, a well-oiled machine, but it's you have people that know what they're doing and people that you trust. And I would say right now, I had a distiller here at one time, and he'll probably never see this, but I had a distiller here. He loved to like experiment around, but he didn't experiment around and tell me about it. He would like tell me later, like, oh, I changed the recipe on this batch. I'm like, okay, I got to file this with Washington State Department of Agriculture. I have an approved formula here. This means you have to follow the formula. You don't get to switch the ratio of wheat and triticale just because you got up on one side of the bed in the morning and you're like, oh,
I want to see if this tastes better.
Yeah. So no, but I think that you figure out what you can do, and then once you figure out, what you're capable of doing, and what your mind is capable of thinking up, and what you and your equipment and your people are capable of carrying off, and then you figure out, well, what are some other things that people might like to see? What are some other things that they might like to see from us? Do we need to do more single barrels? Do we need to do more? Do we need to open up a little bit and have people come in and do barrel picks, cask strength, all this different thing? Barrel picks, I have no idea. So I get I get a lot of barrel picks, and I get a lot of barrel pick samples, and it's like, as a distiller, at our range, like with bottling a batch of Battle Point, we probably, in 53-gallon barrels, a batch bottling a Battle Point might be maybe 8 or 10 53-gallon barrels, which is not that much, which means that each barrel that has variation in it, each barrel is going to steer where that end product goes.
Yeah.
And so we look at all those barrels, and we know when the barrels are different. We know that we have to try to either compensate for them, or we have to let them shine, or we have to do them as singles or whatever. My experience set, isn't that I've got a rick house out here that has like a million barrels in it, and I have some guys come in, and we're going to like set them up with like 8 samples, and they're going to like pick something.
Right.
Who the hell knows what it is? I do know that on the off chance that, the minority of the times you have a single barrel pick, and if you get lucky, it's really phenomenal. It's like a cherry barrel.
Yeah. Every once in a while you get those diamonds in the rough that are just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, this has to go out right by itself.
Yeah.
But for the most part, whiskey really needs to have the influence of all of those barrels to be whole. That's my belief. I mean, it's not like I'm not going to do single barrels, but it's just you need to have all that stuff. If you've got a barrel that's smoky and cedary, and one that's like citrusy with toasted coconut, and one that's this, and one that's that, they're all super interesting from an academic standpoint. Doing them singly, but all together, they really make a whole enjoyable whiskey that's good for the long term.
Right, because you get the balance from one side to the other. Yeah. Yep.
I mean, you still get to put those. Even I've got barrels of whiskey that are like, and I'm super picky, but it's like you have all the aromas that are in single barrels of whiskey. When I go back through my tasting notes, I can tell what kind of a mood I'm in. If I'm in like a crabby mood when I'm writing it up, I'm like picking out all the flaws. Oh, rummy, varnishy, whatever. And then I'll go back and taste it. It's like, was it really that bad? I don't remember it being terrible. And my notes make it sound like I'm some kind of, like 90-year-old man that got told he had liver cancer and you can't drink anymore. But here, write up all these reviews on all this whiskey that you're never going to be able to do again. So, no, but it's this is a fun business.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love the whole, like, the culture, the science, everything about it is fascinating. That's why I have all this that I have. So Cheech is modding 4 channels right now, and he still keeps dropping in here to listen in on us. And so I just want to give a shout out to him and tell him thank you. And Whiskey Wars, Sean over there said that he completely agrees with you. He prefers small batches over single barrels. And I'm thinking that is probably because of the volatility, like of the variance, like to where it's like hit or miss.
So we got on this whiskey that you have it's our
The Hazmat.
the Hazmat whiskey
141.
141.3.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
in the sample pack, it has Hazmat. I mean, the sample pack is the best thing I've seen online in the Washington State craft whiskey scene.
So the guy that came in here in back of me a little bit ago. So Connor Wood came in here and he had samples that I told him I needed him to pull so I could taste them. And one of them was this one, and it's like I tasted it and I go, what's the proof on this thing? And I usually make them tell me, I usually make them write it on the bottle what the proof is, but there was nothing on it, so I tasted it. And it was warm, but it wasn't to the point that I wouldn't have drank it. I go, what was the proof? Did you like purposefully not write the proof on there? He goes, it was 141.3. And I'm like, really? I said, well, that just from the audaciousness of having it being over 140 proof.
Yeah.
We bottled it right before the holiday. It's like, okay, that's perfect for the holiday. 141 proof. It's like over the top. There may be people that have to dilute it with ice or whatever.
There's some great like roasted nuts sitting next to some like dark purple fruits, whether it's prunes or what, I don't know. But there's that combination of flavors in there, and then all of a sudden you feel it dry out your tongue.
So that's rancio is what you're talking about. The prunes. It's what you get when you have a whiskey that's been in a port cask.
Oh,
so
really?
It's like this musty, grapey kind of
Right.
Yeah.
It's like a humid grape, raisin, prune, something in that wheelhouse of fruit.
Yeah, and if you if you drink a lot of stuff or drink a lot of even port or any of that stuff, anything, you can make anything sound like it's appealing. Rancio maybe not be. I've had people go, "What's this rancio thing? What does corn bin mean?"
Yeah, you're never gonna order rancio off a menu. It does not sound good.
No, but if somebody notes that as a whiskey flavor, I'm game to try it. I mean, there's a lot of whiskeys out there that have got some aromatic notes that are just amazing that they made it through. And that's I like all this stuff, all this whiskey. For me, it's amazing that it got made. It's amazing that it made it all the way through the process. And it's amazing that some of this whiskey is so good, and it maybe is only so good in the one bottle that I have. But if I have that bottle, then it's like, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And
so, Sean asked what kind of whiskey is in the Hazmat bottle. It is a wheat whiskey, so it's not a bourbon. It's a wheat whiskey. It's 70.7 proof, so it's 141.4, and that is their Battle Point full barrel proof.
It's made with soft white wheat grown down in Walla Walla County, and it's made with
Now Walla Walla though. What's the mash bill on that?
It's 100% soft white wheat.
Wow.
It's a wheat whiskey.
Yeah.
We're not when we make a single grain, there's no.
You're not fooling around with single grain. Yeah.
Well, when we set out here, I mean, the whole thing was, I'm a believer as much as you can be in whiskey that there is a terroir influence. And I want the whiskey to taste like it's from a place, not just it's a recipe. Now I can get corn and I can get barley and I can get all this other stuff here. And but if I want to make a whiskey that tastes like it came from Washington State is wheat country. I mean, back in the 80s, it was barley country, but there was a huge barley contract that was up between the three big brewing companies in the Midwest, and we didn't get any of the contract. Oregon got a tiny bit of the contract. Montana and Wyoming got all the contract, and we saw our agricultural grain production move from barley to wheat in relatively short order. So Washington is a producer of world-class wheat, and soft white wheat specifically, which is lower in gluten, is a product that is in super high demand in Asia and in Australia. Even though they grow tons of wheat in Australia, they buy wheat from us. Russia, I don't know if we're selling them any wheat right now because they're being they be kind of douchey. But I mean, in the Middle East and the northern part of Africa, there's huge markets for soft white wheat there, and so Washington's a wheat country. That led us to be, hey, we want to make whiskey that tastes like it came from here. If you're making grain like in the old farmer days, you're making whiskey out of the grain that you have. What would it be? Well, it would be wheat. And so we make a wheat whiskey. And the only way that we could figure to impart a discernible, detectable terroir was to situate it on a saltwater island and have as much of a maritime influence as you can pound through barrels.
Yeah.
Even if it's subtle, guess what? If it's subtle, it's subtle. But if you're making whiskey in Eastern Washington, you don't even get that subtle.
Right. So, it's like a temperate desert over there. All right. Yeah. So Sean asked about barrels that were finished in wine. Which one of these were finished in a wine barrel?
None of those are finished in a wine barrel.
Okay. That's what I thought. That's why I asked.
We have Barbados cask, we have Isla cask, and we have Mizunara cask.
Right.
We have Madeira cask, but the barrels fouled before we got them. They got stuck in the port down in LA, and they were in a container for like 8 months, and then by the time we got them, the sugars had converted, and they were vinegary, and they were terrible, so we couldn't use them. We wanted to have them, but so our Two Islands brand, which is Isla cask, Barbados cask, and Mizunara cask, those are all whiskeys that are aged in barrels from places that are producing spirits or alcohol beverage on other islands. So Hokkaido, Barbados, and Madeira is produced on an island as well. So that would have made it like, game for Two Islands, but it didn't pan out.
So I'm gonna pour a little bit of this Isla, and which is your battle point that's finished in Isla cask, right?
That's finished.
Now, you were talking about finished. When I was looking through your website, I got really eager to ask you a question. On the website, it said that you had a maple finished one, but you're sold out right now. Are you going to do it again?
They're just going to put it back up. We just got done doing another batch.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Because one of my favorite bottles that I've gotten this year was a cask strength finished in a maple barrel, because the proof kept the sweetness from getting so high. Oh, that's nice. You see that?
So
can you release some of those at a cask strength? Because if you put them out at a lower proof, the sweetness is so much.
I think my taste buds may be compromised by now, but so these are barrels that so we sell we sell barrel aged maple syrup in the shop here. It's a distillery only item.
Right.
Oh yeah,
I saw that on there as well.
Yeah, this maple syrup comes from Hidden Springs up in Putney, Vermont, and we visited there. That's actually how we found them. And my wife and I were out there. It's probably been, I don't know, God, it's been 11, 12 years ago, and the syrup itself is amazing. And so we started to age it in our used Battle Point barrels, and then as an experiment, we put the whiskey back in the barrel, and we discovered that you had to put it in pretty quick. Once you empty that barrel, that sugar starts to go bad in the barrel. You got to
does it start getting funky?
It starts getting funky.
Oh man.
So
I can see that. Yeah.
So we've been doing this in limited runs. When we do a syrup run, then we throw whiskey in the barrels for the maple run.
Marvin at Whiskey Wine 101 asked if you can get if you're able to disclose the Barbados Distillery.
Well, yeah, it's Mount Gay.
Mount Gay.
Yep. I know that sounds like a direct order, but maybe not. I'm a boomer, so we say my granddaughters live with us. So I've got my 17-year-old and my 13-year-old granddaughter, and I'm informed all the time of the ridiculously inappropriate shit that I'm liable to say at any time, whether we're in company or not.
It's all right. It's totally all right here because I'm 40. I'm Gen X all day. MTV generation. You cannot offend me.
Well, you're a whiskey guy, though. I mean, hey,
and that.
So
and I'm Army all day.
And we are thankful. So we have, and I'll tell your guys this. It's not like we promote it to the hills, but so we have military discount here, and I have met, I can't tell you how many wonderful people who have served this country that have come in here, and it sounds like bullshit and everything, but it's completely my privilege to meet these people. And our military discount is the first time you come in, if you buy a bottle, then you get another bottle of equal value for free.
What?
Yeah. And then there's I think it's a 15% discount after that. And you don't have to show your cred or any of that shit. I mean, if somebody's pussy enough to come in and say, "Oh yeah, I'm ex-military and I wanted the discount," it's like, okay, if you need 15% that bad, then yeah, whatever.
That's awesome. That really is.
That's how I got my line on Cuban cigars. So I've got a really good friend of mine who is X-101 airborne, and he knows guys at Guantanamo. And he came in and he came in for a bottle of whiskey, and then he got a bottle of gin for free, and he was blown away. And he came in and he goes, "I have to give you something." So he went out to his car and he got some unlabeled cohibas that he gets from this guy in Guantanamo, and so he's been my Cuban mule for it's 10 years.
Oh wow,
fantastic!
You said Screaming Eagles, so he was 101st. Or you said 101, so he's 101st.
He's 101st,
yeah.
I don't. I try not to put on airs because I don't want people to think that I'm trying to take part of the honor on there. I've got
No. If I had a business that I sold a product, I would want to do the same kind of thing to where I would look at whatever military discount that I could do and then double it, because even being a service member, I think it's a huge deal because I don't know of any other profession that has such a huge impact on your spouse and your kids, other than being like a police and firefighter. But even them, they get to go home every night. You know, they have the same risk.
We've made them. They're part of the deal too.
Good, yeah. They're public servants all day.
We had a guy that came in here and he re-upped on the platform in front of our still. He was
No way.
He was a sub guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he had the what do you call him? He's not a pastor. He's what do you call it? The chaplain. Yeah. The chaplain was in here, and he did the whole thing. He had all his guys here. It was amazing. It was so fun.
Yeah. That's one of the perks when you re-enlist, because I've re-enlisted multiple times. The last time I did it, it was indefinite. So yeah. I'm not getting out of the military till I retire. Because the last contract I said, it was like till the end. But yeah, when you re-enlist, you get that kind of a perk to it's like where do you want to do it? Where do you want to do your ceremony type thing?
Yeah.
And so some people do it on a mountaintop, some people do it on a Chinook, like on a helicopter flying over something. And I was just like, oh man, just do it. Just sign me up. I'm there.
These guys were like siphoning off some of the distilling capacity of the water regeneration system in the sub to like make alcohol while they're
making that prison wine.
That's right. And I'm like, okay, who am I? Who am I to stand in the way of that? That's my father-in-law was who just passed away was in the Second World War.
Yeah.
And he was on the USS Pensacola in the Pacific.
Yeah, Pensacola's in the panhandle of Florida.
It is.
Yeah.
So it's one of those state ships. There was the Indianapolis and the Utah, and the Indianapolis, which the Pensacola drew the short straw to take the bomb to Iwo, but they twisted a screw and they got put up at Mare Island, and the Indy was like right next door, and it's like, hey, we got a delivery for Iwo Jima. Could you guys take it? And then they get torpedoed, and it's the whole Quint Jaws story. But yeah, I mean, hey, it's the fact that we're here at all is really, it's not because of us. We don't get to sit around here and like make whiskey and decide on what shape the fancy label is going to be on our package just because we deserve to. We're here because a bunch of other people put down the hard work to get it done, and now we have some options. So
yeah, no, 100% agreed.
Yeah, so
I'm there on the same page with you, man.
Yeah.
Let's see. Whiskey Wine 101. Whiskey Wars. They're both still in here chatting it up. Jeff said that he's going to re-enlist if I make first sergeant. All right. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you. Man, what else was I going to ask you? What states are you guys allowed to ship to if people buy products off your website?
So by law, we are not allowed to ship to any place.
Not outside the state?
Not at
all.
So no. So we have we've got a shop here in Paulsbo called High Spirits, and on our website we have a purchase for delivery, and it actually goes to our page on their site, and we have an agreement with them that they have the pricing of their products the same as we have it here at the distillery. And then if you order from them, then they'll ship it out. And I think there's probably 30 states that they can go to. I'm not quite sure.
Okay. And what was that website again?
Well, if you go on BainbridgeDistillers.com,
Okay, and you go to the shop.
Yeah, it'll say shop for pickup at the distillery, which is a artifact.
Or shop for shipping or whatever. Yeah. Because I went there and I kind of recon that and see what was going on.
Yeah, that was a COVID artifact of. Probably have to change the language of that just because it pisses me off.
All right, so if you go on the website, you go to the shop section and go to shipping as opposed to pickup in store, then it'll tell you right there if it'll ship to your state or not.
It should, yeah.
Okay.
There should be a map that pops up and it shows the states that they're active in. They're always adding more states, but that's what they have right now. There are some states that it's just you just can't do it. So
yeah, and I know there's a lot of state laws, federal laws, a lot of like conflicting laws that really hinder that whole element of business.
They're working on it. I mean, they're working on, the federal government enacted a new classification for craft distillers that if you make under 100,000 proof gallons of product, so that's 100,000 gallons of product at 100 proof, then they decrease the tax per proof gallon from $13.50 a gallon to $2.70.
Oh,
huge deal for the craft distilling
industry. That's a huge difference.
Gigantic difference, and that's something that every state has for wineries and breweries. It's just like distilleries are viewed still as like the devil's brew.
Yeah. Yep.
And they're working right now on making it so that craft distillers can ship their products anywhere in the country.
That'd be awesome. I can't wait for that to happen.
Oh, yeah, you and me both.
Oh goodness. Okay, so my last question for you. What is your favorite product you make?
Oh. I would say that it has to be Yama.
Yeah?
The Yama whiskey. It
fuck, now I gotta go buy it.
It's I don't know if I have any here sitting on the desk. I got everything else on the desk.
Man, so out of all the stuff that you've made, Yum is your favorite? All right. All right. I gotta try. What makes that different though?
Well, it's really that it's a barley whiskey, and it's a combination of the fact that barley has this really kind of low, bassy, sugary note to it, and that it really is open enough to allow the Mizunara cask to really express itself without the grain getting in the way. I don't want to say
is all of the Yama that you make aged in Mizunara cask?
Yeah, all of it. It's all 100% Mizunara cask aged whiskey.
Oh, snaps. You hear that, people? Hey, guys, do you hear that? All of the Yama is aged in Mizunara cask, and the only people I ever see besides them making Mizunara is Angel's Envy, and that's just like $3,000 a bottle. Just saying.
Bowmore actually, Bowmore's part of Beam Suntory. Bowmore released a Mizunara finished whiskey.
Oh, they did,
and it's wonderful. And Chivas even has a Mizunara finished whiskey, which I'm not quite sure of the whole provenance of it, but it's only like $60 a bottle.
Chivas.
Who? So Chivas. Just so you know, so the Chivas guys. As much as you go, oh, it's Chivas Regal, whatever. These guys, the House of Chivas, they have more barrels of like old, unfreaking believable whiskey than anybody out there, and always had. They have got, I mean, some of the single barrel stuff that we never see over here, they'll do small batch stuff and single barrel releases, and it's a blend, and everybody like rains on blends and all that stuff.
Is that like an old boys club kind of thing, to where they've been around for a while, so they just accumulate and acquire?
Most of those things are released in 700 milliliter bottles, which are illegal in the U.S., so we don't get them. I mean, so if I only saw Chivas in America, I'd say, well, there's Chivas 12, there's Chivas 18, there's Chivas 21, there's Royal Salute, and then there's like maybe some variant that comes out every once in a while. There's scores of Chivas product that are out there, and always have been. I mean, commemorating the silver anniversary or the silver jubilee of Queen Elizabeth, and all kinds of shit. You can't even believe it. And some of it is probably getting right up there towards maybe even the best whiskey that you might ever have tasted. Some of it is like unbelievable.
I bet, man. If they have those kind of connections, and when you get even started in the conversation of some of those old boy clubs kind of a thing, to where they get stuff that other people don't even hear about.
So you ever shop the Whiskey Exchange?
Yes, I've heard of it, and I've been on there.
Well, go to the Whiskey Exchange and look for some of these variants, even if they're blends. And I'll tell people, like, it's harder to make a blend than it is to make a single malt. I mean, it's hard to take. I mean, imagine every year you have to assemble a puzzle that looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
Pieces that are totally different.
Right. We put together a small batch that's consistent with last year's small batch.
Yeah. So we do an event every year. We're doing it this year. We've been off for 2 years because of the pandemic. But we do an event here on the island called Whiskies for Wildlife. It's a fundraiser for the Puget Sound Restoration Fund. They do like underwater habitat restoration for oyster beds and kelp beds and all this other kind of stuff. Yeah. Super good, super amazing group of people. And we have an event, and all of the big whiskey companies come. And the deal is if they bring it all, like all the stuff, the high mark stuff, the stuff that's on allocation, the stuff that you can't get anywhere, even the stuff that you might have to call back to the home office and get. So if they bring if they bring all that, then I will bring vintage stuff starting from the 20s and rolling through to the 60s of those same brands. So we'll be able to put together a vertical. So like I'm a fan of blended whiskey just because I mean, for the longest time, that's all that there was. I mean, in Scotland, we didn't have single malt until the 60s. So we put together a vertical tasting of Dewar's White Label, starting with Dewar's 1912. Yeah, Dewar's, and then all the way up to the current make. And like when you taste those historical whiskeys all the way through, you start to see that some brands kind of tailor themselves to what the prevailing, social attitude is. Here's what people are looking at. Yeah. And some of them, they're like, this is who we are. Like Teacher's Highland Cream, which is like a small brand here, but a big brand in the UK. Their product from like the 19 teens to today, it's like, man, it's like a string that goes from here to here, and it doesn't go off track at all. It's like
they've literally been putting out the same stuff for over 100 years,
and they've been putting it out using different whiskeys to make that flavor every year.
Man,
I mean, all of us guys, we're like, oh, we have 10 barrels of whiskey or 50 barrels of whiskey. We're going to bottle it up, and that's what it tastes like this year. These guys, they're like, hey, we've got business in Asia, we got business in India, we got business in Europe and the UK, we got business in America. We got to release all this stuff. It's all got to be the same, and it's got to taste like last year's. Oh, and half the distilleries that we worked with last year, they're out of business or they don't have anything to sell us. We got to figure out a way to make it all taste the same way.
Yeah. By the way.
Yeah, by the way, not like that's a hard thing. Don't lose any sleep over it, but but
Goodness.
they find a way to do it. I mean, there's the whiskey business in the UK is different than here, but it still is. It's still really it's fueled by people that really care about what they do and really just, I mean, they're willing to go to the wall to do it the right way. The treat in the UK is, and in some ways you get it here too, in big distilleries, but you go to the UK and you meet some guy that's in the cooper shop, and his dad is the malt man, and his grandpa used to work as the warehouse manager. You got multi-generational people here that are working for the same company. You got people, I mean, you got people that were born in the superintendent's house at the distillery. It's like a different. It's a different thing. It's a lifer kind of a thing. So the whiskey.
Sure, it's like a village.
In
the thing.
It is.
Yeah, and it's a lifestyle.
In America, in America at the distillery, there's a lot of it that's the same way.
Yeah.
In the marketing side of it and all the other stuff that you see, it's not. But in the operations part of it, I mean, there's a lot of it there. I mean, there's a lot of when you have somebody that becomes a master distiller or somebody that's in charge of picking barrels and making product. I mean, you don't have somebody that becomes master distiller that's been working there for 3 years. You got somebody that's master distiller that's been working there for 30 years, and he spent the first 20 or 25 years under somebody else. And now what he's doing is he's picking the barrels that the guy that taught him how to do it made 20 years ago. And there's like you're carrying that forward.
Right.
And it has a certain amount of, it has a gravity to it.
Yeah. Almost like a Jedi aspect to it.
Kind of. Not quite as lethal, hopefully. But
with that series, the intake from your influencer, your master, your trainer, and carrying that on, because it's a lifelong commitment.
It's anachronistic, but if you look, you'll find it. I mean, you go back east, and you look at companies in the East that make anything. They make anything that requires a level of skill and handwork and like an understanding of the DNA of it.
Right.
Companies that have been making cheese for 120 years.
Yep.
Companies that making anything that involves like process
generations.
Yeah. And they get it. They're like, okay, well, this is how we do it. And the new generation is like bent on not fucking up what the old generation did.
Right, because it's a legacy.
Carrying the baton.
Yeah,
so
it's a legacy. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, yo, Keith, I'm gonna say, man, I really enjoy what you got going on over there. I'm really looking forward to all the other stuff you got coming out, and I'm going to be in the front of the line waiting for the next stuff, like when your maple syrup drops and all that. I want to be at the front of the line for that, because what you gave me so far is fantastic, and I really like it.
Get on tomorrow and look for the maple syrup, because they're going to put it up there tomorrow. Fridays.
Is it tomorrow?
Yeah. So Friday is the day that they usually drop that stuff, and as hard as it was to produce for us, because we're organic, we did do a relatively large batch of 100% pure organic rye whiskey about 5 years ago, and it's coming, and it's like that shit's on fire, man. It's like, yeah, it's really good. I'm super excited about it, just because it's like
good.
Rye is like the the wild man of the grain world.
Yep, it is.
And, you know,
Yeah, and I've heard it's really hard to work with too.
oh,
Yeah. So
It's-
the maple finished, is that not the Battle Point?
it is Battle Point.
Okay, I thought so. I was just making sure. Double
And
check.
it's
I thought it was, but
It's not
Oh.
cask. It's not cask strength,
okay.
but it's not super sweet either. It's
Okay.
not like my wife says it's like she says it's like Christmas cookies.
Oh, okay. I know. I get that. I get it.
We did a vodka. We stopped doing it because the price of vanilla got so high. But we used to do a vanilla vodka where we would take 3 organic Madagascar vanilla beans, like big long ones, 10-inch long ones, and we'd put them inside a bottle of vodka, and then we'd let it stand off for like 8 months. And
Yeah.
it was amazing. I mean, but now with the price of, vanilla, you'd have to charge idiotic price for vodka. But,
Right.
we're always working on some,
Good.
you know,
Well,
ta-
yeah, I'll keep my eye out for that tomorrow. Man, I'm pumped.
Okay.
That's good. All right.
I'll
So
make sure you get some.
Huh?
I'll make sure you get some.
Good. So I'm gonna cut the live. I'm gonna close off with you in the what do you call it? The waiting room backstage.
Whatever they call it.
We're gonna close it off backstage, me and you. But the rest of you guys, those of you in the chat live stream, thanks for joining us. Go to Bainbridge Distillery on their website and check out what they got and see if they ship to your state. If not, then hit me up direct and we might be able to work out a hand delivery. You know what I'm saying? All right.
Aim to please.
See you guys later.